All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going back thousands of years to unpack one of the most chilling phenomena in ancient history. We are looking at how humanity, when pushed to the absolute brink of survival, engineered some of the darkest practices imaginable. Specifically, we want to know exactly how these ancient rituals functioned then and what drove ordinary people to do the unthinkable.
Picture this. You're in the ancient city of Carthage, right in North Africa, about 3,000 years ago. You find yourself taking part in a nighttime ritual that completely defies all modern logic, and honestly, every parental instinct. You really have to ask yourself, why? Why would a mother or a father take their own weeks-old baby, a child they absolutely love, and willingly hand them over in the dead of night? It is a terrifying question, but as our source material shows, there is a deeply structured, almost mechanical answer to how this society operated under extreme duress.
Moving to Section 1, the darkest ancient ritual. To really grasp this, we need to drop right into the middle of the horror. See, this wasn't just random chaos, it was a highly orchestrated system directed at an entity known as Baal. Picture a massive, terrifying bronze statue with its hands tilted downwards. Right beneath those hands, an unquenchable fire. Parents would actually hand their infant to a priest who'd place the child on those bronze hands and, well, they would slide directly into the flames. All the while, deafening drums are pounding to completely mask any noise. But here's the kicker, the most psychologically devastating rule of the whole thing. If a mother shed even a single tear, the sacrifice was void. Literally void. They'd have to start the whole process over with another child. That level of emotional suppression is wild, but it shows exactly how systematic this terror was. And we're not talking about a rare, one-off event here. The Greek historian Diodorus documented that during times of extreme crisis, like a catastrophic war or a devastating plague, they scaled this up dramatically. We're talking up to 200 children from noble families sacrificed in a single night. 200! It was a literal industrial scale of terror.
Which brings us to Section 2, Archaeological Proof and Mechanics.
For the longest time, historians thought this was basically just a grim fairy tale, or maybe Roman propaganda. But excavations near ancient Carthage tell a very different story. They've unearthed over 2,000 clay graves across an area spanning more than a hectare, and they are still digging. Inside those graves, the burnt remains of very young children. Sometimes they even found 2 or 3 tiny skulls packed together. But the absolute most chilling part, the thing that proves how this ritual actually functioned, are the inscriptions. They found wooden boards that literally read, "I gave my child to Baal." It was a transaction. Seriously, just like we tap our phones to buy groceries today, these ancient people believed they were making a literal transaction with a deity to buy their survival.
The physical location of these mass graves was called a tefet. The sheer horror of this site left such a massive, permanent scar on human history that the very word evolved. In the Hebrew language, tefet eventually became entirely synonymous with the underworld, essentially hell. That is the lasting legacy of this ritual.
So, let's look at Section 3. Who was Baal originally? To really figure out how these ancient rituals functioned then, we have to rewind to the Levant region about 3,000 years ago. Who actually was Baal? Did he always demand this horrific stuff? Well, surprisingly, no. The source material shows that initially, Baal wasn't a demon at all. It was just an everyday common word locals used that simply translated to Lord or Master, just a respectful title for their regional deities. It's honestly a tragic transformation. Originally, Baal was seen as this ultimate life giver. He was the god of rain, storms, and fertility. If Baal was happy, your crops grew, the weather was great, and society thrived. He provided for them. But then you contrast that with what he became, a demonic force demanding the ultimate human sacrifice. So the obvious question is, how on earth does a society get from point A to point B?
That leads us to Section 4, Fear, Drought, and Manipulation.
How does a life-giving rain god turn into a literal nightmare? Just imagine going months and months without a drop of rain. Severe, brutal droughts strike the region, wells are bone dry, crops are burning to a crisp in the sun, and families are starving. Pure, unadulterated survival fear grips the entire population. They run to the temples panicking, asking, "Is Baal angry?" And right there, that is where human manipulation steps in. These ancient rituals didn't function out of nowhere. They were a desperate response to environmental terror, brilliantly but ruthlessly exploited by priests who demanded blood in exchange for rain.
You have to understand, people weren't doing this out of some joyous religious devotion. This was raw survival. They genuinely believed that buying the gods' favor was their only ticket out of the drought. And they chose the most innocent victims, infants, specifically because they couldn't fight back. The crazy part? When the rains eventually, naturally returned, just due to normal weather cycles like El Niño, the people falsely correlated that rain with their sacrifices. In their minds, the system totally worked.
Let's move on to Section 5, the fall of Baal. Obviously, a system this horrific couldn't just go unchecked forever. Over time, other religious texts started pushing back hard, framing Baal not as a savior, but as an incredibly dangerous false idol. The sources point to a massive showdown in the 9th century BC. Israel was going through a brutal drought of its own, and Queen Jezebel was pushing the region to worship Baal. This is when the prophet Elijah steps up and challenges 450 priests of Baal to an epic standoff at Mount Carmel to prove whose deity was actually real.
And when you look at the timeline of this showdown, the mechanics of Baal's rituals just completely fall apart. The challenge was straightforward: the real god will send down fire. So for hours, Baal's 450 priests are dancing, beating their drums, and nothing. The source tells us this actually dragged on for weeks. The priests get so desperate they start frantically cutting themselves and bloodletting. Still, total silence. Then we hit the climax. Elijah literally pours water all over his altar, multiple times, just to prove there are no hidden sparks or magic tricks. The grand finale? According to the texts, fire descends straight from the sky for Elijah, while Baal stays completely silent. That spectacular public failure basically shattered Baal's image forever.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 6. The modern myth survives.
So the physical sacrifices eventually stopped, but the lore surrounding Baal only got darker. Ancient texts completely morphed him into a literal demon. Just look at this description from the 17th century occult text, the Ars Goetia. Baal is no longer a bronze statue. Now he's got 3 faces: a cat, a toad, and a man. He has 8 thin spider-like legs so he can silently creep down walls. He speaks with his deep, terrifying voice that echoes from beneath the earth, and he supposedly commands 66 legions of spirits. Talk about a frightening evolution, right?
And this dark evolution feeds directly into the modern conspiracy theories detailed in our source. The myth shifted from sacrificing children for rain to secretive groups of elites, often called the Illuminati in pop culture, allegedly honoring this ancient entity for extreme success today. The modern myth is basically that to climb to the very top in music, media, or politics, you have to secretly bow to this entity, essentially trading your soul for worldly dominance.
But let's take a step back and ground this in reality. Because as this explainer reveals, the true darkness here doesn't actually come from supernatural demons. The core mistake wasn't the deity itself, which, remember, started just as a word for lord and a provider of rain. The mistake was humans taking things in a horrific direction for their own benefit. Whether it's ancient priests manipulating a terrified population during a drought to keep control, or modern elites obsessing over unchecked power, the mechanics of this horror, they are entirely human.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound thought to chew on. We look back at ancient Carthage and just shake our heads in total disbelief. But even without the bronze statues and the unquenchable fires, are we still sacrificing our true values, our time, our morality, our humanity, just for the pursuit of power today? Thanks so much for exploring this dark history with me. Let me know what you think about all this, and let's keep questioning how our past shapes our present.